What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Brave and Faithful podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Raiden Dionisio. And this evening, I have a Marine veteran. He is also he's also a podcaster of the Fearless Mindset. And he also owned a security company called Ledlow Security Group. I have none other than Mark Ledlow. Mark, how are you doing, brother?
Good. Thanks for having me on. And it's Friday, and I think we're in the spring up here in Southern Oregon, and been a crazy week. And I'm glad we get over this COVID-19 stuff so we can get back to living life.
Yeah. Hopefully, you know, with all these vaccinations and things like that, we'll maybe somewhat return back to normalcy. But I mentioned you're a Marine. Always once a Marine, always a Marine, right?
That's what the Commandant said, so I hope it sticks.
But can you just tell us a little bit about your service? You know, what you did in Marine Corps and how long did you serve for?
Yeah, sure. I was in the Corps for 8 years, and part of that 8 year service, I was also in the reserves, which allowed me to go to college and get my undergraduate degree, which was in criminology. And then when I was doing that, I had some side jobs, part-time things just to support myself.
Okay.
And I worked juvenile corrections, and I was a reserve cop, and I was doing that all plus reserves, plus going to school full time. And so I had like three things I was juggling at once for like 6 years while I was going to school to get my bachelor's degree in criminology. So it was a crazy time. And then during my time in the Corps, I was a radio operator, communications,
Okay.
and for some reason, all the NCOs and above like to pick on radio operators. They thought we didn't do anything anyway. We just sat around and played with our radio, and so you became the whipping Marine. That for whatever reason they just picked on the radio guy. And in school, they taught us that when you're in combat, the first ones that get shot were the radio guys, and they had like a 3 second life expectancy span once they got off the helicopter in Vietnam. I'm like, oh shoot, that doesn't sound good for my MOS. So I'm already dead before I got off the helicopter. But what the Marine Corps did for me was it opened up a lot of opportunities that I never envisioned or thought of when I got out of the military into the private sector. And it just doors opened up that things where I didn't think or feel that I was qualified to even do.
Yeah, it's funny you're talking about your MOS as a radio operator. So I'm corpsman, still a corpsman. It's kind of like the same
Yeah.
thing that they told us when we are going to school. It's like, if you're a radio operator, if you're a corpsman, like those are the people that they would target. Um, if you were in that situation. But um, so when you were serving, what was the time period when you served in the Marine Corps?
I was during the Clinton administration, so I think Bosnia was a lot of talk about going to Bosnia. There's stuff with Russia was going on, so it was. I got in 1994 and then got out. No, I kid you not. A week after 9/11 hit, I got some mail from the Department of the Navy. I thought they were orders. I opened it up and said, "You're on will be discharged from the United States Marine Corps." And I'm like, "What the heck?" And 9/11 literally happened a week before that.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And my unit went over like on half a dozen tours over to Iraq. So
Yeah.
wasn't meant to be, I guess.
So how did you, mention earlier, you have your own security company. When you got out, like, how was that transition, and how did you come about with, creating your own company, your own security company?
I think for me, I had to experience life after the military, after corrections, and I wanted to do something different. And so I was kind of fascinated by the corporate life and all that. It just seemed fascinating. And I grew up in a little town called Grants Pass, Oregon. And I'm like, I need to get out of this little bubble. I need to, spread my wings and fly. So I started interviewing for some corporate jobs, and I think my first job was for a consulting firm out of Chicago.
Okay.
I had some retired officer in some military branch. I can't remember what it was. She goes, first thing she said to me is, "You're military, you're Marine, you can handle this. Hire him." I had no finance background whatsoever, no business background, no business college courses, nothing. And they threw me in the lion's den. They say, I'm hopping from airport to airport, going from, I think I started jobs in Nebraska. And the next thing you know, I find out I flew into Canada and I got stuck in Vancouver for like 5 days because I didn't have a passport.
And what were you doing for that job?
I was working for a company called back then Georgia SMA International. They were a consulting firm. I had no idea about profit loss statements, and I sit in this office of this logging company in Canada. They wanted me to do profit loss statements, and I'm like, what's that? So I had this computer in front of me, and I have this guy that's a senior executive consultant. He's telling me, okay, I need you to do this. Google. Back then there was not even Google, so just search, do an AOL search.
Right.
I'm like, what is that? And the next thing you know, I'm packing my bag and flying back to Oregon because I didn't know what I was doing, but I took a chance and winged it. And I'm like, this is not comfortable.
Yeah, that's crazy. So they saw that on your application you were a Marine,
So
and then they're basically like, "Oh yeah, he can handle it."
he can handle it. He can figure it out. And it's the thing called setting yourself up for failure, and that's kind of what that did. But I got to travel a little bit. I could see a little bit of the business world, and I figured early on, I'm not a numbers guy. This is not my thing. I
Right.
I kind of blank out, and my eyes start spinning in my head.
But that's just going back to how you landed that job. It just goes to show how much maybe how much trust or how much confidence they have with the military. If if you were
I
in the
do.
service, and you said it right there, you said like, "Hey, this guy's a Marine. He can figure it out. He can do it." Right? Like it's just crazy how much if you were in the service, how much confidence like the civilian world
They
has
do.
on service members. So
Because they look at you, all the leadership motivation training you've had during your term of service in that military branch, and they go, "Oh, you can deal with it." Like I got offered a job as a bank manager at Key Bank, and she goes, "Oh, he's military. He's a Marine. He can handle it." And I was really good at networking, so I used that strength to bring in contracts or accounts, and knowing nothing about accounting or finance or profit loss statements, I just had someone else help me because
right.
I knew I sucked at it. And from there on, that just kind of carried on. I got a little bit of experience in the corporate world with the banking world. I worked for Sprint PCS, started selling stuff, and the phones couldn't even sell themselves. And I was working for Sprint for a little while, and I found out the guy before me that got fired was the number one sales guy for all Southern Oregon with a different carrier, and he was like the top guy in his field. But yeah, we went over to Sprint. He couldn't even sell a Sprint cell phone because it was just a different type of network, and it was hard to sell, and they were too expensive. And so he got fired. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm in the same situation. The guy before me was the number one in the competitive market, but he came to Sprint and he couldn't even perform. And
Hmm.
now I'm getting fired for the same thing. I'm like, I think this is the recipe for disaster.
So how long were you in that world? How long were you in that corporate world before you founded the security company?
I was in corporate probably for about 5, 6 years. And then I went on to work for Washington Mutual for about several years as a regional account manager. And that was merchant services. And I did really well with that. I was the number one producer with that one product. And then 2008 market crashed.
Right.
And then I headed down to Southern California, and all my friends that were from Southern California that were tired in Oregon said, "You don't want to go down there. That'll be the worst thing you ever did." And it was almost like when I did the move and transition mentally, it was almost like going back to boot camp in the military all over again.
Mm.
The culture shock, the adjustment, and I went and got my concealed weapon permits and all my permits to work legally in California. That took about 8 months to do that. The next thing you know, I'm working so much, and then started networking and meeting different people. And that was about a 15-year run from 2008 to where I'm now. It took about 10 years to create that network, create those relationships, create that trust with those different decision makers to where I could partner with some other guys and start bringing in business, bringing in contracts. And eventually I started my own, kind of like my own security brokerage firm a few years ago. So it took time. Like anything, you got to put your time in.
Right. So you said about 15 years, making connections and, growing the company. If there's anybody out there listening, like looking into, getting into that business, or maybe like, and they're interested in Ledlow Security Group? Like, how does one get into that?
First, you got it. The hardest thing about the executive protection rule is that's pretty much what we do. The hardest thing to do, they say, is break into it. If you don't know anybody, you don't have a network of people you're associated with, you have to start somewhere. And of course, everybody wants to start as a bodyguard with a celebrity. That's the thing they think where to start, but actually, it's so opposite of that. You have to start from a boring job. Maybe you're just a security guard at a mall. Maybe you're sitting in front of a bank in a car, and it's
Hmm.
not glorious, but it's a start. You got to just get that door to open, even if it's sitting on a house somewhere. And you have your guard card, and you just got to, Craigslist, Indeed, but it's mainly about networking to be successful in this industry. And the best way to network is go to, they call them bodyguard schools
Mm.
or executive protection schools. And I'll give a pitch right now. I'm actually partnering up with the guy named Ron Owens of Fame Marketing. He's a 20-year vet in the Army. And another gentleman by the name of Frank Mir, two-time UFC heavyweight
Yeah.
champion. We're all getting together and we're going to create and launch a new training system called the Ronin training system, which is basically training people to go in the private sector security world and or renew their licensing for different agencies and police departments that they work for. And the whole idea behind it is to give them medical training and give them combative training with Frank Mir and how to become a bodyguard if they want to do that. Now we're going to be doing that starting in May 7th in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And we'll be doing that 4 times a year. And so we're really looking forward to that. But again, it's about going to different schools to networking. You have ESI, you have AS Solutions, you have Childless Horses and Associates. There's some great guys out there that have some great training schools, but that's probably where you're going to meet a lot of guys in the industry, and that network is that's your asset. That's becomes your net worth in the industry. So networking is huge, but you need to have your guard card in different states, and then the biggest thing is probably having your concealed weapons permit, and you have that. If you're a retired cop with the right state license, you can pretty much work anywhere. But because of COVID-19, we've seen a shift where that demand hasn't been there like it used to be in the last 8 months. I mean, the industry pretty much dried up.
You're talking about just your industry, the security industry?
Yeah, because you don't really have the executives traveling from A to B and
Okay.
going from their home to San Francisco for corporate meetings. Everything's Zoom, so everybody's home. And so the offices are empty. You don't have workplace violence. Now you have a thing called COVID-19. And where we see the increase in business has been like doing site security at like different banks. So we had like, I think 20 locations in the West Coast, and we had about 15 locations in the Midwest of being a service provider for a large security firm organization. We did that for about 8 months. That's pretty much what kept us alive for a little while. And so you have to pivot and change and adjust to different trends that are taking place. And of course, you have the rioting. That was
Right.
with Portland, Oregon, burning up every other day, it seemed like.
Yeah. So yeah, let's go into that. Like, you've been in business for quite a while. You mentioned, you said 2008. Is that when you started?
Yeah, about 2008 is when I got in the industry in Southern California. That's when I got legitimately licensed to do everything.
Okay. And then, throughout that time, and, like you mentioned, COVID hit last year. Would you say that would be like the most challenging time in your business, or has there been anything else prior to that that's kind of like tested you? And how did you guys overcome those moments or experience?
Yeah, COVID-19 was definitely a game changer for me because I just did a trip to Southern California to LA to see a friend of mine. And I usually travel to go to conferences and meet people for potential business
Right.
projects. And he said, "Hey, how much money do you spend going to conferences?" I'm like, probably, I don't know. I think I did about 30, 40,000 one year just business traveling. He goes, that much? I'm like, yeah. Well, I bet if you spend XYZ per month with me and you start launching your podcast so people get to know who you are. I'm like, oh, really? Never thought about that. I usually go to conference and meet people, but it said, yeah, put yourself on YouTube, create your own podcast, and start networking with the people for their industry and get them to come on your show and talk about themselves and experience their stories, have them share their stories. And I'm like, oh, so at that moment in time, I had to pivot, overcome and adapt because we couldn't go anywhere. And I'm like, how do I stay relevant in social media? I hate
Right.
social media. I hate Facebook. I hate Instagram. But I'm like, well, you got to do it until people know who you are because everybody's sitting at home anyway. I'm like, well, I might as well do something productive. So that's kind of where the fearless mindset idea came from.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I mean, podcast is pretty much the new radio, right? It's like the
It
new
is.
wave of uh, it's so many softwares and apps nowadays, so easy to create your own show, and like you said, just kind of get the word, kind of get the name out there, and start creating business. um yeah, so let's talk about that, the Fearless Mindset podcast. So it's basically where you interview uh, people within your industry, correct?
Yeah, that was the original idea. I had Mike Trout, the author of The Protected, on. He was a former CIA security officer for George Tenet, and he was with that detail for many, many years. And I knew his circle of influence would probably help elevate the podcast and maybe bring in some bigger players in the security industry, which it did. And that was, yeah, you're right. It was predominantly to focus on the security industry to help guys that were agents in the field sitting at home
Okay.
have learned from the experts and the security industry from the various guests that I had on board. And then I'm like, you know what, I want to expand the market of the audience. So I was fortunate to come across Frank Mir, who's a UFC fighter, through a mutual friend, and he came on the show. And I'm like, you know what, I want to talk to business guys too. I want to talk to business people, security people who are just movers and shakers just in their industry, to see how their brains tick. And the biggest common denominator was, they have to remain fearless even in COVID-19. They got to figure out how to, bring money in and how to keep pushing forward.
So is that how like the name of the podcast kind of came about, or?
The name actually came back from my dad. He got diagnosed with cancer 3-4 years ago, brain cancer, out of nowhere.
Okay.
And it was the journey with my dad for about 3 years until he passed away, and how he
Mm.
was in his battle with cancer. And he was fearless. He just didn't have a fear about the end of his life. He had definitely had a faith. He was a pastor,
Okay.
and he had a business himself. He sold hearing aids, and he just had a heart for people and love for life. But his faith was the thing that got him through. And because of that, I watched him till his last moment, last breath. And I was sitting with Christopher Decker with Salescast. He goes, "Well, what do you want to call your show?" I'm like, "I have no idea." And then all of a sudden, just boom, the fearless mindset, and that's
Mm.
kind of where it was born from. My dad's journey to cancer, and yeah, it kind of gave me the motivation to drive. Like, well, if you don't try it, what do you have to lose?
All
You
right.
know. And so the journey began, and that was 8 months ago, literally.
Well, that's a amazing story, and thank you for sharing that, Mark.
Yeah, you bet.
So since you've started, you said 8 months ago with the podcast, you got that now, and then you obviously have your security company. What would you say has been like the most rewarding from the two, from the company and the podcast? What's been the most rewarding experience for you?
Probably just connecting with people I don't even know. I mean,
Right.
I'm getting messages off LinkedIn saying, "Hey, I've been listening to your podcast." And I'm like, "Whoa, wow, really?" And that kind of inspires me and motivates me to keep on going with it. Because like like you're like, "Well, am I ever going to make money at this thing? If this thing ever pay for itself?" And I was actually shocked to my first guy that offered me some money. I'm like, "No, I think it's too early to
Yeah.
be exclusive or anything like that." So I turned down the first offer. I'm like, "Mark, have you lost your mind?" But it's just I'm free to talk about whatever I want to talk about because I'm able to do that, independently. But the most rewarding thing would probably be my personal growth and not being scared of what we're doing here. Just having a conversation, talking, and if anything, it's how many lives you can impact. A veteran military guy, maybe he's dealing with suicide, depression, anxiety. I had been forcing on not too long ago. He's the most sought after young pastor in the United States of America. He's got the #1 best-selling book, and I forget the name of it. He was just on USA, the US or Today show a couple days ago, and he was on the show. And just having something we can give to the vets. They're dealing with depression, or they can't find work, and they're locked up, and they just don't know what to do. And the biggest thing you can do is do something.
Right.
Create a hobby, start working out, start studying something, or take a test. And I failed it 3 times just today. I'm trying to pass this Oregon State test. I failed it 3 times today of like multiple choice. And I got this big old binder. I'm looking at this binder for 3 hours digging for finding the answers. I still failed it, like, but not being afraid to fail. How many times did Michael Jordan fell before he became a 6-time title holder?
Yeah, I think that's a great message you're saying there. I mean, like, so many of us, like society, like school says, like, oh, try to play it safe, right? Try to avoid that failure, of that feeling of failure. But you kind of need that to learn from that, and to learn from those mistakes, to help you move forward in whatever you want to do. So I mean, like you said, just don't be afraid to fail. At least you went out there and you tried, right? Like, instead of thinking of what if and what could have happened if I did. You went out there and you tried, and if you fail, you fail. Just move forward with it.
Like, guys, kid you not, when we got done, I had my 3rd attempt. I missed 2 questions, so I had to retake the whole course all over again. That was about 5 minutes ago before I got on this podcast with you. Like, okay, am I gonna let that control me going into this podcast with you? No, you gotta dust it off. Almost like you almost have to have like a Tom Brady mentality. If you want to win that Super Bowl, you got 5 more yards to get that touchdown, and you have 20 seconds to make it happen. You almost have to have the amnesia of being hit, or amnesia of what you just went through.
Yeah.
You got to shut it down. You got to move on. You got to clear the mechanism, and you just got to go for that clutch. And that's just life. And I think that's what I've been able to harness psychologically in my own life. It's just, yeah, you might have a failure, you might have a disappointment, but that's life. You got to overcome those disappointments, and you have to overcome those failures, and cast that vision, cast that hope. What do you want to do tomorrow? What is your goal for the next 2 to 5 months? And set goals for yourself, and stay off Facebook, stay off Instagram, and find a new hobby, find a new passion. And I think that's what a lot of people need, and to get off of the news and do something positive for the mind. Get out there and work out for an hour every day, just something positive for your brain,
and develop that fearless, like your podcast, fearless mindset.
Yeah, it's worked out. I mean, it's the rewards have been huge. I mean, opportunities that presented themselves in the last 8 months since I've been a show, it's been kind of crazy going, wow, a lot of things have unfolded.
It's awesome, man. So for those of you guys just listening in, I'm talking to Mark Ledlow. He's a Marine veteran. He's also the owner of Ledlow Security Group and podcaster of the Fearless Mindset podcast. So, Mark, for those that are listening in, and like we said, trying to get into the security company business, maybe they want to start their own podcast. What's one actionable step that that they can take right now in pursuit of that service?
If they want to pursue their own podcast or tell their story, they can reach out directly to me at Mark at ledlowsecurity.com, or you can probably message me. I'm at Instagram at Fearless Mindset Podcast, is me at the Instagram, or Ledlow Security Group on Instagram, or probably just email me at Mark at ledlowsecurity.com.
Okay.
And then I can point him to Salescast with Chris Stecker. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and so you can find me on LinkedIn, and then on YouTube, I'm at hashtag Mark Ledlow. So there's many different ways to get a hold of me, but I would recommend like Christopher Decker has Salescast, and he launched me probably 9 months ago. in the podcast world. And then if you want to get in the security industry, you can probably find me on LinkedIn, Mark Ledlow. And I have Ledlow Security Group and then the Fearless Mindset on LinkedIn as well. So I'm just all over the place, just trying to, create awareness, make an impact in people's lives. And if they want to break in the security industry, probably the best way to do it is get a mentorship, go to a training school like a bodyguard school or an executive protection school. There's several out there. And we're going to be launching ours, Ronin Training System, with Frank Mir, the UFC heavyweight champion, and Ron Owens. He's the owner of Fame Marketing. So there's many, many ways to get a hold of us.
That's awesome, man. So there you go. For those listening in, just get a hold of Mark, whether you want to start podcasting or, you want to break into the security business. Mark, you mentioned Salescast. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that's all about?
Yeah, Salescast, they are they're producer of podcasters is what they do. They like,
Okay.
you have Spotify, right?
Right.
Well, Spotify, they just bought out Joe Rogan. And so Salescast kind of does the same thing. I think they're up to like 20 podcasters that they produce.
Okay.
And they're always looking for, new guys that want to tell their story, girls too, or professionals. You don't have to be a bodyguard like I was, or military. I mean, they have doctors they work with, multi-millionaires that want to tell their story. Lisa Florida is a good friend of mine, and we've been on each other's show. And Chris Decker is founder of Salescast, and they just they have a contract. They do basically they just produce content for people.
And that's just mainly podcasting, or just?
Yeah, they mainly that's their bread and butter. They just do produce podcast content, and they do one show a week.
Okay.
And they do trailers for them. They do scripts as well. And Christopher's really talented. He comes from a very media-centric background. And then Colin Mitchell is his partner, and he's more of the sales guy. So they complement each other really well. And yeah, Christopher Decker at Salescast on LinkedIn. And if they want a referral, they can use me as a referral to LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to do an introduction as well. But I highly recommend they help me get booked on your show. For example, they gave us the intro. So pretty much, so they're like my booking agent now to get me on other shows to make that impact and spread the word around.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I mean, especially helpful for somebody like you who, you have your own business going on, and it helps to have somebody, kind of like vet, even just emails and make that introduction. So.
And what we try to do, we're a body. Basically, the best way to describe what Ledlow Security Group does is you Secret Service to the president, and what we are is a private security for the super wealthy. We do estate security, we do dignitary stuff. I've protected many highly ranking royal family members from the Middle East. People, I'd say their name, you know them. And because of the non-disclosure agreements I've signed, I can't really discuss who they were.
Yeah.
That's why they pay you a lot of money to keep your mouth shut.
All right. So Mark, before we go into the second segment of the podcast here, so what's one thing you want our listeners to take away from this episode?
Probably the biggest gift I can give anybody out there is live today as if you're last. You go all out all day. Just go out, live today as your last. And if you don't, like the test I took today, I failed it 3 times. Don't hold you back. Don't let it hold you back psychologically. You have a failure, you have a disappointment. Don't let that disappointment and failure hold you back for tomorrow. Tomorrow's a new day. And yes, you have to live life, because life's just too short. Watching my dad die of cancer, that became, I think, a mental shift, a trigger pull in my head to, have amnesia about a failure. Just keep going, keep moving, move forward. Yeah.
And I've mentioned this before. I think the only time you should only look back is kind of just see how far you've come.
Absolutely. That's profound.
I appreciate you for saying that. So going into the second segment here of our podcast, Mark. So this is what I call the Fast Five. It's where I ask the same 5 questions I ask all my guests. So let's go. First question here is, what's one hobby you enjoy?
I used to be working out at the gym, but I haven't been in the gym in a year. So have to have a new one. Probably river rafting.
River
Love
rafting.
river rafting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said you're in Oregon, or you're in
Southern Oregon.
Southern Oregon? Okay.
Yeah. So it's
Awesome.
a different world. Outdoors, mountains, trees. Like living in a national park.
Yeah. It's I need to make a visit out there. I haven't really been up in the Northwest. So second question here. If you had to choose one person to hang out with for one day, who would it be and why?
I'd say Clint Eastwood.
Clint, yeah, he's got no fear.
He's got no fear. I mean, he doesn't care what anybody thinks. I think he's almost 90 years old, but just
Wow.
he's a vet, Army vet too.
Right.
And I heard the story about his helicopter crash in the middle of the ocean. He had to swim back and almost died and drowned. And the guy has just been relentless his entire career.
And he's one of those guys that's, he's been an actor, director. Like you said, he's a veteran, like, yeah, he's one of those man's man guy.
Exactly.
All right. Next question here, Mark. Recommend a book for audience to read.
Probably The Magic of Thinking Big.
The Magic of Thinking Big.
Yeah, I forget the author, but it's a really good one.
Is that? Yeah, go ahead. What?
Or the Hung by the Tongue is another good one.
Okay. The Magic of Thinking Big, is that more of like a personal development book, or like?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it just gets your head to think bigger. Bigger beyond your situation, and just more of a bit as a motivational personal development book.
Okay, I have to check that out. All right. Next question here, Mark. What's your favorite quote and why? I think you mentioned this earlier.
You live today as this is your last.
Yeah.
The reason why life's too short, it's just, you got to keep going.
Yeah.
I think because I spent so much time in that nursing home with my dad when he did pass away, it's like you see people that used to have that hope in their eyes, and then you can see that look of depression in their eyes, because when 90% of the people in there, they don't see their family members. They're in there, and the family members just leave them there. It's really very disappointing to see.
Yeah. Live your day as if it's your last. I mean, life is too short. You guys just enjoy the ride while you still can.
Right. Exactly.
All right. Mark, last question. Where do you see yourself in a year, 5 years, or even 10 years from now?
Hard to say. I mean, I'm involved with so many things. I'm going into real estate as well. I'm also, launching the Ronin training system with Frank Muir and then Ron Owens. So that's going to be interesting to see how that goes. And, Ledlow Security Group, we're starting to take on some more business. So I'll be a serial entrepreneur. Retired, probably not. I got too much energy and I like to do too many things at once.
Do you see yourself still within your security company, or kind of just stepping away within maybe 5-10 years, or?
Probably step away in probably 10 years from now. Yeah. Probably help out the younger veterans that want to get into business, mentor them and coach them, and probably just do more business development, more maybe personal growth, maybe go on the speaking tour. I'm going to be probably working on a book here in the next year, releasing that and getting maybe on a book tour or something like that. So then get into real estate. Real estate seems to be cash flow, residual income type of thing.
Yeah, that's another thing. Just with last year, just been educating myself and, investing in my first investment property here. So,
congrats. When did you do that?
That was at the beginning of the year, in January. Just starting off a little small, single family, and then hopefully from there progressing. Multifamily.
Did you use your VA loan for that?
No, it's a straight rental property. So I
put
25% down.
Oh, good job.
Yeah, man. So, I mean, everybody talks about like real estate is responsible for what they say 90% of wealth. So, got to get into it. Got to get into the game.
Yeah, one book I recommend is called Snowball, the autobiography on Warren Buffett's life. I read that right before the 2008 crash. And Ford Motor was trading at $1 a share. And I threw $500 down on Ford Motor stock, and it went up to $20, $15 a share, and sold it, bought into Facebook and Apple after that. So like you said, most of your wealth is going to be in real estate and a lot of investments. So you got to have a good portfolio, they say. But yeah, can't go wrong on real estate.
Are you trying to go multifamily, or like what's your game plan with that?
A lot of my buddies I'm hearing they're going into apartment complexes.
Yeah.
Because I'm hearing that there's going to be a lot of people losing their businesses in the next 6 to 8 months. And I'm hearing there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be losing homes because of lack of income coming in to pay for those homes. And so I'm hearing the rental industry is going to skyrocket.
Wow.
So yeah, I'll probably go single family for a little while, rent out a couple houses, and use that equity to leverage. Probably go into maybe duplex or something like that down the road. But I would recommend getting advice from somebody that's done it.
Yeah.
And one of my best friends from high school, he's building multiple apartment complexes, and I always talk to them before I even make a decision, asking for guidance, because you don't want to do something on your own brain, because if you use your brain, you're going to probably fail because you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk further offline about this, but I'm actually part of a mastermind. I'd be happy to make an intro if you're interested.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, Mark, I appreciate it again for taking the time. Before this, like you mentioned, you were taking the tests. You failed 3 times, but you didn't let that get you down.
Push forward,
past. And I think that's the ultimate lesson here with the show, right? Like, no matter how hard you get, no matter how hard you get down, or how many times you fail, you just got to get yourself back up and pull yourself together, and like your podcast, develop that fearless mindset, and just keep going.
Awesome.
Mark, before we go, where can our audience follow you? Where can they support you? Where can they find out more about you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do have a website. It's the fearlessmindsetpodcast.com.
Okay.
And I'm actually on iHeartRadio under Mark Ledlow.
Okay.
We just got approved for that. I'm on Apple Podcast too, Mark Ledlow. And just YouTube, do like a Google search on my name. I'll come up on YouTube, hashtag Mark Ledlow. And Instagram, Fearless Mindset Podcast. And Ledlow Security, Instagram, and LinkedIn, Mark Ledlow. And then follow me. Yeah. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Mark Ledlow, as well.
Awesome. And Mark, I appreciate you for, like I said, taking the time and sharing your story here. And
one last thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
One little plug. I'm going to be doing a live YouTube feed with Frank Mir next week in Las Vegas for his upcoming heavyweight boxing match in Atlanta, Georgia, coming up. I think April 17th. So if your viewers are big boxing fans, Frank Mir's fans, he's going to be boxing, so you want to subscribe to that. I'm not sure where it's going to be, on pay-per-view or whatever, but he's got a big fight. We'll be doing a YouTube probably live stream next week in Vegas with Frank Mir.
Awesome. So make sure you guys tune into that. Mark, thank you for the time, and I'll talk to you soon, brother.
All right, thanks for your time too. Appreciate it.
All right, take care.